What a marvelous miracle of technology where we can all connect together from across the world. Where I am right now, it is 5 a.m. and I'm sure for many of you it's early. For many of you it's very late. If you're in the UK or Europe, it must be evening for you now. If there's anyone who's crazy enough to be here from Dubai or somewhere in that region, it's probably even later. So thank you very much for being here, and I'm looking forward to this workshop. So we're going to talk about how to assess and progress your Pilates clients. And I've been working this workshop for several weeks, and last week I put together a little survey and sent it to all of you who'd registered and said, what are your biggest challenges when it comes to assessing and progressing your clients? And reading all of the responses, of which there were many, so thank you very much, everybody who responded to that, I realised I'd written the wrong workshop. I'd written a workshop that wasn't what you wanted to learn. So after spending weeks polishing this beautiful workshop that was very slick, in the last 5 days I've completely rewritten it. So this version, I believe, is much more in line with what the majority of you wanted to learn. All right, so maybe I'll give that other workshop some other time. All right, so here we go. How to assess and progress your Pilates clients. All right, so just to be completely transparent, I do have an agenda. I guess we all have an agenda, a reason for being here. And my agenda today is, firstly, I want to teach you useful skills. And I also want to give you an experience of what it's like to be in a diploma lecture, because this is pretty much what it's like to be in a diploma lecture. And I'd like to inspire you to enroll in the diploma. But even if you don't enroll in the diploma, this is not going to be a big pitch fest for the diploma. I want to give you simple, actionable, useful tools that you can walk away with and be a better, more confident, more skilled instructor when it comes to progressing your clients. So that's why I'm here, and I hope that aligns with what you're looking for. So could you please, just to be friendly, please type in your name and where you are in the world into the chat. I'd love to see who's here. I'm sure everybody else would be really nice to connect. South Africa, UK, California, Finland, Brazil, Colorado, Australia, Glasgow, Estonia, UAE. You are crazy. What time is it in the UAE right now? Must be very late. Hey, Matt. Very early for you in Australia. 11 p.m. Oh, that's not too bad. All right. So thank you very much. Great to be here. And for those of you watching the replay, great to be with you in the future as well. All right. So our learning goals for today are, firstly, that every Pilates exercise can be described in terms of 3 dimensions: strength, range of motion, and control. Secondly, that to progress, and we're going to focus in on strength, because in the 60 minutes that we have allotted, we could do a deep dive into a small amount, or we could do a shallow dive into a large amount. And I think a deep dive is much more useful for you. You'll walk away with stuff that you can use straight away. So we're going to deep dive into strength. To progress strength, you need to train within 2 to 3 reps of failure. And we'll talk about exactly what that means as we go through. Find an exercise where you can't do more than 10 reps. And when you can do more than 10 reps, progress to the next exercise. And that, my friends, is what we're going to learn over the next 60 minutes. All right, so first, every Pilates exercise can be ranked along 3 axes or 3 dimensions: strength, range of motion, and control. And by the way, I'm delighted to see several of you, scribbling frantically, and I'm all for that. And I will also share these lecture slides with you as a PDF after the event. We'll email you the PDF. All right, so every exercise can be ranked in terms of 3 dimensions: strength, range of motion, and control. All right, so we're here to learn how to assess and progress our clients. So what does progress mean? Well, first we have to understand what we're doing before we can learn how to do it. So to progress, if you look in the dictionary, do you know what progress means? What do you think? Don't type it in, just think in your own mind. What does progress mean? Well, it means to move forwards towards a destination. Okay, so if we're progressing, we must have a destination. So rule number 1 is you need something to progress towards, right? And if you're not sure what you're progressing towards, well, there's your problem right there. First order of business, choose a goal, right? Now in Pilates, we could progress our clients towards returning to a valued activity they can't currently do because of back pain or injury or something like that. We could progress them towards mastering a challenging exercise. I want to be able to do teaser on the long box, or whatever it might be. We can progress them towards just a generalized increased fitness and health. Okay, and I'm sure there are other things that we could progress them towards, but those are just some examples. And so even if you're not working one-on-one with clients, if you're working in a group setting, okay, you should have a goal of increasing your clients' fitness and health, and working them up towards mastering some more challenging exercise. So if you don't have a goal in mind, it's basically very hard to make progress towards any kind of goal. So set an intention, okay, and even if it's increase fitness and health, that's a great one. Okay, but if it's more specific, if you're working one-on-one with clients, they might want to get back to doing their yoga pose or gardening or, playing with their kids or whatever it might be, and that can be your goal or their goal. And whatever the goal, we can measure progress towards that goal in 3 dimensions, and those are strength, range of motion, or ROM, as I'm going to call it for the rest of the lecture, and control. And we can divide every single Pilates exercise into these 3 components. All right, so we can rank every exercise. We can look at every exercise and go, on some kind of arbitrary scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the easiest and 10 being the hardest possible, how hard is this exercise in terms of strength? How hard is it in terms of range of motion? How hard is it in terms of control? Okay, and we can do that for every Pilates exercise. And in fact, we're going to do it for a few, because this is step number 1. So I've used pictures. I've created a little spreadsheet here for you, and I'm going to share this with you after the workshop as well, when I send you the PDF notes. So we're going to work through this. Now, I've used pictures here because we're all trained in different styles of Pilates, and we probably use different names for the exercises. So rather than talk about a particular name, I'm just going to go, okay, you've probably seen something that looks pretty similar to this before. Okay, so when I was a kid, I would have called this ab prep, or something like that, but you might call it something different. That's cool. Okay, but basically, you can see what it is. So on a scale, let's rank it. Just type it into the chat, please. No right or wrong answers, because this is just arbitrary, right? It's just like what you reckon, what I reckon. Scale of 1 to 10, 1 being easiest, 10 being like asleep on the sofa, or like your great grandma could do it, okay? Or 10 being like very, very challenging. How challenging is this for strength? Okay, not overall, but just from a strength perspective. Type it into the chat. What do you reckon? Yeah, I'm seeing mostly 2s and 3s. Okay, a couple of different numbers. Okay, and I'm not going to say anyone's right or wrong because it's all subjective. But let's go with the majority, and let's make this a 3. Okay, just for the sake of an example. Okay, you might choose a different number when you do it for yourself, and that's fine. Okay, what about range of motion? Okay, again, 1 is your great grandma could do it. 10 is Cirque du Soleil. Where does this fall? Again, I'm seeing like twos, threes. I'm seeing different numbers, but, I'm going to go again with the majority. Let's go with a 3, okay? And what about control? Control is the combination of proprioception, coordination, balance, or basically our ability to control our body in space. Where does this rank? Again, 1 is super easy, 10 is standing on one leg on a Bosu, juggling a chainsaw, a live cat and a raw egg whilst doing the teaser. Okay, again, I'm seeing 2s and 3s, probably more 2s. I'm going to say this is a 2. Okay, again, it doesn't matter if you chose a different number. You can make your own list after we're done. All right, so we've got a nice little chart here that says this is a 3 for strength, a 2 for ROM, and a 2 for control, right? And, all right, let's now do this exercise. Let's say she's got her feet resting on the fit ball there. She's got her hands resting on the floor. Her butt is on the floor as well. So it's kind of an ab exercise, but it's kind of like both ends of her body are supported. So, what do you reckon? Strength-wise, so not from a balance or flexibility perspective, but just purely from a strength perspective, do you reckon this is easier or harder than the previous one? Like, if we said this is a 3, okay, let's all agree this is a 3, is this a 4 or a 2, would you say? Type it in. From a strength perspective. Okay, I'm seeing various, but, I'd say the majority look like 4s, so let's go with a 4. Again, the actual number doesn't matter. You can make your own list. What about from a range of motion perspective? Easier or harder than a 3? Easier would be 2, harder would be 4. I'm going to agree with most of you. I think it's a 4, a couple of 5s and 6s in there, but let's just keep things simple and make it a 4. What about from a control perspective? Balance, proprioception, coordination. Yeah, I reckon I'm seeing like 5s and 6s and 4s mostly. Let's go with 4. The actual number doesn't matter. But, the basic concept is we all agree this one's a little bit harder, right? So that's the basic principle here. And not only that it's a little bit harder, but it's a little bit harder on the strength dimension. Okay, so there are other exercises that might be harder than this one on flexibility or control, but maybe not harder on strength, right? So if we wanted to progress someone on strength, we need to pick an exercise that's harder on strength. Right, what about this one? I would have called this like a half teaser or a modified teaser when I was a kid. Okay, don't know what you call it, but let's say on strength, what do you reckon this is, 1 to 10? 10's hardest, 1's easiest. I'm seeing 5s and 6s. I reckon mostly 6s, so let's go with a 6. What about range of motion for this one? Easier or harder than the previous one? Range of motion. Well, her hips are a bit more flexed than the previous one, so it requires a little bit more hip flexion, but her knees are a lot more bent, so it requires less hamstring flexibility, right? I mean, some people, me included, would struggle to have their back and their legs straight in this position, okay? But not many people are going to struggle to have their hips bent and their knees bent here. Okay, also for some people, this shoulder position is going to be a little bit challenging flexibility-wise, whereas this shoulder position for 99% of people, not going to be challenging. Would you agree? Okay, so I'm going to say this one here is a bit easier in the range of motion than the one above, right? I'm going to say maybe that's a 3. Okay. What about control? More or less challenge to balance, coordination, etc. in this one? Yeah, I'm seeing 5s and 6s, and I agree because she's got less points of contact with the floor. Okay, smaller base of support, so it's harder to balance. Also, she's got a very thin mat there, which also makes it harder to balance. Although the other lady doesn't have a mat, so I guess she's at a disadvantage. So I'm seeing like mainly 4s and 5s and 6s. Let's go with 5. All right. So if we wanted to progress this exercise in terms of strength, this would be a good choice. But if we wanted to progress it in terms of flexibility, this would not be a good choice. Is this making sense? All right. What about this one? Strength, 1 to 10. 1's easy, 10's hard. What do you reckon? Okay, I'm seeing 6s and 7s and 5s and 8s. Let's go with 6. Again, it's just a number that we're choosing, so you could choose a different number when you do this yourself. What about range of motion? How challenging is this range of motion wise? I'm going to say it's, I'm seeing like 4s and 5s and 6s. I reckon this is not very challenging at all, range of motion wise. I mean, imagine if this lady's sitting up, like with sitting on the floor, she'd be leaning back, right? So imagine she's trying to touch her toes here, sitting on the floor. She'd be reaching to about her knees. Can you kind of mentally rotate her in your mind's eye so her legs are flat on the floor? And she's doing like spine stretch forward or something like that. Okay, this should be if we saw a picture of that and said this is her maximum flexibility, we'd say she's very inflexible. Would you agree with that or not? So I'm going to say, again, from a strength perspective, this is quite challenging. I don't think my great-grandma could do it, right? But purely from a flexibility standpoint, okay, I don't think this is that challenging. Does that make sense, or can we agree on that? So I reckon this is maybe a 3, something like that. Might be a 2, might be a 3, like somewhere around there is where I would put it. What about control? Balance, coordination, proprioception, ability to control your limbs in space, in the position of your body parts. I'm seeing 6 and 7s, and I agree, because that magic circle, if you've ever squeezed one of those between your ankles, you know they want to fly off towards the ceiling, a lot. So that's quite a challenge. So I reckon 7s is about the right number. Okay. What about this one? I'm going to call this an, in quotes, ab exercise. Okay. 1 to 10, how challenging is this on your ab strength, would you say? I reckon it's about a 1. What about range of motion? Yeah, 2 or 3, something like that, because we are kind of pulling the knee in towards the chest, and that might be tight for some people. And you can't quite see it, but I'm assuming that the other leg is kind of flat along the floor there, right? So it's kind of sort of getting into a one-leg stretch or kind of split position, right? So, it's not an extreme position by any means, but it is kind of a little bit of a stretch, okay? So I reckon a 3 maybe, 4, something like that. Whatever you said, that's fine. Control. How challenging is this to control? I'm assuming they're swapping legs every now and then. Say they're doing like some kind of variation on one leg stretch, okay, where you swap the legs. I reckon, maybe 1 or 2 or something like that, okay. Anyone with basic control of their limbs can probably do it. Let's just put a 2 for the sake of putting something in there. All right, so we've got these exercises here, okay, and we've got, this one's and if we think about the strength component, right, so let's put aside the flexibility and the control elements for now. Okay, let's just think about strength. All right, so we've got a 3, we've got a 4, we've got a 6, we've got another 6, we've got a 1, okay? So can you see how if we ranked these in order and just said, okay, let's start with 1 at the top and then work down to the 3s and then the 4s and then the 6s, right? That's a progression, right? So you would start people here, okay? And then if they can do that, okay, you'd progress them to here. And if they're doing well with that, well, then they get to do this one. And if they succeed there, well, then they're ready for this, okay, and/or this, right? So that's just a basic progression. Now, we've ignored the range of motion and the control for now, and we're just going to do that for the rest of today just to keep it simple, right? But you could also sort by strength and then second sort by range of motion, right? So you could choose exercises with a 4 or lower range of motion score and then rank them by strength, right? So you could adjust this any which way, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But does that make sense, that concept that we're ranking these on a scale of 1 to 10 for difficulty in terms of strength, okay? And then we just go, okay, well, the easiest one is where you start, and then you work down the list. Thumbs up if that makes sense. Okay, good. So we're talking about mat work so far. So now, and the reason I've done that is because I'm assuming that all of us have done mat work in some shape or form. If you haven't, that's cool. But some of us have worked on a Cadillac at some point. So if you've ever done something like this, I'd call this a teaser on the Cadillac, okay? If you've ever done this with a push-through bar springs from below, if you don't know what the heck this is, doesn't matter. We'll move past this fairly quickly. But if you have done this, where would you say this sits in terms of strength challenge relative to, say, this one here, right? The half teaser on the mat, right? Easier or harder? We said this is a 6, okay, for strength, okay? What would you say this one is if you've done this one? Yeah, I reckon it's more than a 6 because it springs from below, right? So you're pushing against the springs, right? So it's your body weight plus the springs plus she's got her legs straight, which makes it harder as well. So I'm going to agree, bunch of 7s, bunch of 8s, let's just make it a 7. What about range of motion there? What do you reckon the level of challenge? Now, anybody, even if you haven't done this exercise, you can have an opinion on this because you can just see where her arms and legs are and think, is that a challenging position or not? Yeah, I'm seeing, 6s and 7s. Again, just going to choose what looks like the most popular one or what I think number 6, okay? Because the hip flexion position is relatively challenging. Then that shoulder flexion position is also, it's not extreme by any means, but it's like, okay, you have to have full range of motion to get there. What about control? How challenging is this to control, would you say? All right, so I'm seeing lots of 6s and 7s and 8s. I'm going to pose an alternate viewpoint, okay? I reckon it's easier than this one. Why? Well, in this one, she's literally just balancing on a single point here, her butt. Well, I guess you could say it's 2 points, okay? But here, her hands are grasping onto the bar travels through a fixed arc, okay? The bar doesn't let her wobble sideways or back or forth. And if you've done this exercise, you can just push up into the bar and it basically makes it super easy in terms of coordination to roll up, right? So the strength element is harder, I would agree with you, than this one, okay, because of the spring resistance. But I would argue that the control element is actually easier in this one because of the bar, makes it easier to balance, right? I mean, I'm sure you've all seen clients struggling to balance in this position, right? But have you ever seen anyone overbalance in this position? I doubt it, right? Because they can just hold on to the bar. So I'm going to say this is if we said the other one, what did we say it was? A 5. I'm going to say this one's probably like a 4 or a 3. Can we agree on that, or does anyone have a strong opinion that's different to that? You cool with that? Okay. Let's just say a 3 again. The actual number doesn't matter, but the point is I think it's an easier challenge to coordination, right, compared to the mat work version. All right, what about this one? Again, if you haven't done this, that's fine. Backstroke on the long box. Okay, she's got springs pulling her down there. Her head's off the end of the box there. What do you reckon, strength-wise? We said this was a 6 out of 10, okay? So given that, what do you reckon? If you've done this one, what do you reckon? More or less challenge than the 100 on the mat? And even though she's got a magic circle in her legs on the mat version, I'm going to say this is harder. This is harder in my view, right? Because you've got the spring resistance pulling you back there, and because you're on the box, those ropes are really stretched, which increases the tension on the springs, plus your head's off the end of the box. So even just getting into the start position, you're already working. Plus you've got the long lever of the legs there. So I reckon this is like an 8. Okay. That's my view. If you've got a different view, I'm okay if we disagree on that, but that's how I would see it. Okay. What about range of motion? So she basically goes here and then she kind of does a circle with her arms and the legs go down, and up. And so what do you reckon about that? Does that look like a harder or easier challenge in terms of range of motion than this one, or about the same? Again, ignore the strength and the coordination aspect, but just in terms of the flexibility aspect, where would you rank this one? Yeah, I reckon like a 6 or a 7, something like that. Let's call it a 7. Okay, what about control? This one easier or harder than this one, do you reckon, control-wise? I agree with you. You guys are all saying it's like a 6, 7, 8, something like that. I agree it's definitely harder than this, so let's make it a 7. It's harder because the straps are free. Your hands can move through space anywhere, whereas the bar here is fixed, so it gives you more support. Plus she's on a box which is moving, on a moving carriage, so there's definitely more challenge to control here. Plus when she lies down, her head doesn't go onto the box here, whereas this person, her head does go onto the box, so onto the, whatever that's called, Cadillac. So, yeah, I think there's definitely more instability in this one. So I would say that's a higher challenge to control. All right, back to the mat. And this is just the, a close approximation of a teaser. Okay, this is basically the full exercise. So where would you rank this in terms of strength? 1 to 10. I'm seeing 5, 6, 7s, 8s. Let's go with 6, okay? And I'm not going to, if we wanted to have an amicable disagreement about whether this is harder or easier strength-wise, I think we could have a discussion about that, okay? And I don't have a strong view one way or the other. The way we could tell, right, is jump on the reformer, see how many of those you can do, then take a break for 10 minutes to recover, jump on the mat, see how many of those you can do, right? Whichever one you can do fewer of, that's harder, right? So we could actually measure it, okay? But, while we're just sitting here armchair philosophizing about it, let's say it's roughly a 6, okay? What do you reckon about range of motion? More or less challenging than this one? And if you think about the starting position of this, if you're lying on the mat with your arms fully outstretched overhead and your legs fully stretched the other way. So what do you reckon about range of motion wise for this one? It's somewhere about the same or a little bit less, something like that. Let's call it a 6. If you said 7, I wouldn't disagree either. What about control? What do you reckon about the control challenge on the teaser on the mat? I reckon it's pretty hard to control. Depending on how spongy the mat is, the spongier the mat is, the easier it is. Also, depending on the anatomy of your backside, the bonier your backside, the harder it's going to be. So, but let's call it a 6 or a 7, something like that. Okay. Again, if you said it's a bit easier than this one, I probably wouldn't disagree. Okay. But then again, she's balancing right up on her butt, whereas in this one you're still lying on your back, so there's a bigger base of support. So, I think you could argue both ways. But the point is, we can rank it. All right, last one, the 100. Strength-wise. 1 is your grandma can do it, 10 is abs of steel. Okay, I'm seeing like 4s and 5s and stuff. Let's just make it a 5. What about range of motion? How hard is this from a flexibility perspective? Yeah, it's like a 2 or a 3. Let's make it a 2. What about control? Again, relative to the full teaser or the, the backstroke or, even the half teaser. What do you reckon about control-wise in this one? I'm seeing 2s and 3s and 4s. I'm seeing a couple of higher numbers, so let's go with a 4. All right, so that's all I've done here. I mean, we could keep going. There are obviously more exercises, okay? But this is the basic process here is you can just rank each exercise and go, this is this number for strength, range of motion, and control, right? So this is just what an exercise I did for us to work together, but we've got all these extra tabs down the bottom here, okay? So we've got flexion exercises, extension, rotation and side bending, upper body push movements, upper body pull movements, and lower body squat or lunge type movements, okay? And you can divide every Pilates exercise there ever was, right, into one or more of these categories, right? So anything that involves loaded spinal flexion, you could put in this. So what have we got? Flexion, right? And I've just put like 3 here that are super easy to think about, okay? And you can add your list. I haven't made a list here really because I don't know which exercises you know. And so you might work on the Cadillac, you might work on the mat, you might work on the reformer, you might call the exercises different names to what I call them. You might have different favourite exercises that you like teaching all the time than the ones I like teaching. So I've left this for you to make your own list, okay, of spinal flexion exercises, okay? So you might have like cat stretch at one end and like snake on the reformer at the other end, okay, or whatever, right? It's up to you to make this. And then just rank them. Strength, range of motion, control, okay? And then once you've got them ranked by strength, range of motion, and control, okay, you just hover on this little part of the cell here and you sort A to Z. And there's the easiest, the second easiest, and the hardest. Right? And if we had 99 exercises there, they'd be ranked from number 1 to number 99 in terms of difficulty according to strength, right? So we're disregarding range of motion and control here because if we're thinking about progressing our client's strength, okay, well, again, if you're looking at this going, what, the rolling back is hard, not harder than the roll up, like that's kind of immaterial, okay? You can rank these however you want, but the point is you put some easy exercises, some medium exercises, and some hard exercises in here, okay, and this will sort them for you. You can make them hardest to easiest if you want, but that's not the way I would do it. Okay, so sort them easy to hard, and there's your progression, right? So we've got flexion, we've got extension, okay, breaststroke, swan dive, swimming, whatever other exercises you wanted to put in there, okay, rotation and side bending, mermaid, spine twist, side bend, upper body push movements like a kneeling push-up, a full push-up, a one-leg push-up, or you could call out like a leg pull front, okay, however you wanted to describe it. Upper body pull movements, shoulder bridge, roll over, swimming, okay, where you're working the back of the shoulder girdle, and squat / lunge movements, so squat, lunge, single leg squat, okay, whatever other lower body, you could put shoulder bridge in there as well because that's a lower body exercise. Okay, so whatever exercises you do for the lower body, you just put them in here and then you can sort them. Sort A to Z, bam, there they are. Easy, medium, hard. Okay. Does this concept make sense so far that you can just basically create a list of whichever exercises you teach on whichever equipment you use and then go, okay, here they are ranked from easiest to hardest in order. Any questions about that process or that concept? Okay, that's awesome. So let's get back to the lecture slides, okay? So we said that every exercise can be ranked in 3 dimensions. That's strength, range of motion, and control, and that's what we just did, okay? The next important concept to grasp is that to progress strength, okay, to get stronger, okay, you need to train within 2 to 3 reps of failure. Now, I'm going to put a little caveat on this because, we have 60 minutes here today and we could literally spend a whole year talking about how to get stronger, right? So obviously there's some bits that I'm glossing over in this discussion today. But basically, when you're a beginner at exercise, right, anything you do is going to make you stronger. Like if you go for a walk, you will get stronger legs, right? If you're sedentary enough, right, anything will make you stronger. But pretty soon you're going to plateau out, right? You're going to hit a plateau and you're not going to continue to get stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger just by going for a walk every day, right? Or we could say if you hop on a reformer and put on 2 springs and do footwork, if you can barely lift yourself out of a chair because you're so unfit, well, doing footwork on 2 springs, you're going to get stronger, right? But pretty soon you're going to stop getting stronger. Okay. So what I'm talking about here is not like, can you make any progress? What I'm talking about is, can you make consistent progress over time? So I'm talking about those clients you've had for 3 years. It's like, well, how do I keep progressing those people? Okay. And even the beginners, like after the first 6 weeks, they fall into this category as well. For the first 6 weeks, you can basically do anything and they'll get stronger, right? But after that, you're going to have to be a bit more intentional about it. So here's how to be more intentional about it. All right. So you need to progress. You need to work within 2 to 3 reps of failure. All right. So here's just a citation. Now on these PDF notes, when you receive them, this is the citation. So that's the name of this paper. And here is a link. You can download the paper and read it. So this was a systematic review and meta-analysis from 2021 called Effects of Resistance Training Performed to Repetition Failure or Non-Failure on Muscular Strength and Hypertrophy, a systematic review and meta-analysis from the Journal of Sport and Health. So that's, looked at the totality of the literature on this topic in 2021, and this is what they found, that you have to train within 2 to 3 reps of failure to consistently increase strength over time. And 2 to 3 reps before failure is where you slow down noticeably, even though you're trying not to slow down. Okay, and I'm going to show you what that looks like right now. So here's me training all the way to failure. See if you can notice when I start to slow down noticeably. Okay, when I get to that point where it's just starting to slow down. So a lot of you picked that, okay? There was a very slight decrease in speed around rep 7 or so, okay? But there was quite a pronounced decrease in speed around rep 9, okay? Which is about 3 reps short of failure because I did 12 reps, okay? So you can see this in your clients, right? If they're doing the works, like as you get within 2 to 3 reps of failure, you have to slow down. Like that's 100% certainty that they will slow down when they get within 2 to 3 reps of failure. Right. And if you're working at a weight where you can do 10 reps, right, or it doesn't have to be a weight, a load where you can do 10 reps. If you stop 2 reps short of failure, you do 8 reps. It's pretty straightforward. So why do you need to work near failure? So we saw that systematic review that found that it is the case that when you work within 2 to 3 reps of failure, you make much greater strength improvements over time than when you work further away from failure, right? If you stop like 10 reps short of failure, you're going to make very, very small to minimal to no strength gains over time. But if you work close to failure, you will get gains over time. So why is that? Well, the key stimulus for strengthening a muscle, okay, is a high level of mechanical tension. Tension is just a pulling force, okay? So a high level of pulling, okay, on individual muscle fibers. Now, this is a crucial thing to understand. We think about activation, okay, activation of muscles a lot in Pilates. Now, often activation, when muscles are activated, there's tension on them, right? Most of the time, okay? But it's not always the case. And it's not actually the activation that is the stimulus for strengthening, it's the tension, right? Now, you can have activation without tension, right? So just say I pick up something very light, right? And then I tense my muscle, Okay. Well, there's activation, but there's almost no load on the muscle. There's almost no tension, right? So doing bicep curls with my AirPod case whilst tensing my muscles as hard as I can is not going to result in significant strength gains. Like, I could do this 10 times a day for the next 10 years. I wouldn't get a lot stronger. Okay. But if I pick up a 10 kilo dumbbell and do that, I'm going to get a lot stronger over time because there's more tension on the muscle. Does that make sense? Now, so you can have activation with or without tension. You can also have tension with or without activation, right? So if I go into a stretch, okay, and put a 10 kilo weight on the end there, okay, and I'd completely relax my muscle, okay, and I'm just stretching it, okay, that stretch without activation will stimulate the muscle to grow, right? So this, and they've done laboratory studies with rats and actually also studies on humans where they immobilize people's ankle in a cast, like a boot, okay, that is, puts their calf muscle in an extreme stretch position, a 9 out of 10 discomfort stretch position. And they make these people do this for 1 hour a day for like 8 weeks or something. Right, who's going to volunteer for that experiment? Doesn't sound fun, walking around in a boot at a 9 out of 10 discomfort for an hour a day. Okay, but what they find is at the end of that 8 weeks, their soleus muscle, their calf muscle, has grown, right? Just from passive stretching, but it's very extreme passive stretching, right? But the point is, tension with or without activation is the key stimulus for muscle strengthening. Right? Now, often tension and activation go together, right? But not always. Okay. And so here's why we need to understand this next point. All right. So the key stimulus for strengthening is high levels of mechanical tension on individual muscle fibers. So your muscle, each muscle is made up of let's call it 10,000 muscle fibers, right? And each fiber runs the full length of the muscle, right? Each fiber is a muscle cell. Right? And so each fiber becomes stronger or not independently. Like, you can't really strengthen a muscle, right? You can strengthen this fiber, and you can strengthen this fiber, and you can strengthen this fiber. And if you strengthen all the fibers, then you strengthen the muscle, right? But the basic unit of strengthening is strengthening individual muscle fibers, okay? So we need a high level of tension, on individual muscle fibers in order to stimulate strengthening, because individual muscle fibers are what gets stronger. Okay. So each muscle is made up of thousands of muscle fibers, and when we contract each fiber, okay, each fiber only has an on or an off state, right? A fiber can't contract at 30% or something. It can't partially contract. They can either only contract or not contract, right? So if you've got 10,000 fibers, okay, and every fiber can only be like 100%, fully contracted or just completely relaxed, okay. Well, if you pick up something that's very light, okay, that doesn't require your full strength, okay, how do you do that? If every muscle fiber can only turn on completely or not at all, like, how do I contract my muscle with like 10% of my maximum strength? Well, the way we do that is we only use a percentage of those muscle fibers, right? So if you pick up something that's 40% of your maximum strength, okay, you recruit about 40% of your muscle fibers, and the rest of the fibers are completely off, right? So if you pick up something that's about 40% of your strength, 40% of those muscle fibers are contracting and they have a high level of tension on them, right? Because even though you're picking up something that's only 40% of your maximum, you're only using 40% of your fibers, right? So all of those fibers have high tension and therefore a stimulus to get stronger for these fibers, but not for these fibers. Is this making sense? Thumbs up if this is making sense. If not, ask a question or just give me a shrug. Okay. So after a few reps, okay, those first fibers start to fatigue. Right? So guess what? We engage other fibers. We go, oh, we'll just turn those ones off and turn these other ones on, right? So these ones have already received a stimulus, right? These ones are already going to get stronger now, but none of the other ones yet. Now, if we do more reps, okay, now these ones are going to get stronger as well. We're stimulating these ones with high levels of tension, okay? Eventually, those are going to fatigue out as well, and we're going to have to recruit the next lot, okay? And you can see this last lot here. It's like I recruited 40%, then 40%, and if you're really good at maths, you know that 40 plus 40 is 80, okay? And 80 out of 100 only leaves 20% left over at the end, okay? Well, guess what? This might be where I start to slow down, right? This is about rep 9, okay? Now I'm going, holy crap, I'm lifting this 40% weight with only 25% of my fibers or something, or 20% of my fibers. It's like, yeah, it's not going as fast anymore, okay? So now we know I've activated all my fibers, right? I've pulled all of the reserves out. There's no reserves left. Like everything's, in play, okay? So eventually all of those fibers are fatigued, and that's where you literally can't do another rep, right? Like you saw me with the biceps curls, right? And at this point, all fibers have experienced high levels of mechanical tension, and thus the whole muscle is stimulated to get stronger, right? So here's the thing though. Fibers are always recruited in the same order, right? So I'm not sure if I've got another image here. I think I do. No, I don't have another image. I'm going to just go back to this one. Should have put another image in. All right. So when we do an easy exercise, right, something that's only 40% of our maximum, right, it's always these 40% that we recruit. It's not some other 40%, right? It's always those first ones. It's called Henneman's size principle. Okay, it's a well-established fact in exercise science that we always recruit. They're called the low threshold fibers that we recruit first, right? So anytime you do a light or easy exercise with that muscle, it's always the same, the usual suspects, okay, those same 40% of fibers that you recruit first, right? So if you always do if I did those biceps curls, I could do 12 reps, right? If I only did 4 reps with that load, right, I would always recruit the same set of muscle fibers every day when I do my 4 reps, right? So I would only be working 40% of my muscle fibers. Does that make sense? And then the next 4 reps, okay, is where I would recruit again every time those same second 40%. Like that would be that's the same sequence you always recruit them in. Okay. So those final fibers, okay, these ones here, they only ever get recruited in the last few reps before you fail. Right? You never use them when you're picking up a cup of tea or when you're, lifting your baby out of the bath or whatever, because you only use them when you're doing a maximal effort and you're right near the end of your ability. Okay. And the thing is that these fibers here, okay, you use them all day, every day, right? Every time you pick up a cup of tea or whatever. So they're already close to their max strength because they're working out 100 times a day. When you brush your teeth, you pick up a cup of coffee, you put on your shirt, like you're always using these low threshold fibers. So most of our potential to increase our strength comes from the high threshold fibers, okay, which are these ones, okay? These are the ones that have got the biggest potential to increase strength, and these are the ones we only activate right towards the end in those last sort of 5 to 7 reps before we hit failure, okay? So most of the magic happens in any set, in any exercise, doesn't matter how heavy or light it is, the final 5 to 7 reps is where most of the magic happens, in terms of that is where the vast majority of the stimulus for strengthening occurs. Because then you're recruiting those high threshold muscle fibers, those final set of muscle fibers, and subjecting them to high levels of mechanical tension. Does that concept make sense to you? Do you have any questions about that? Okay. So we said that every Pilates exercise can be ranked in strength, range of motion, and control. Okay. And we said that to progress strength, you need to train within 2 to 3 reps of failure, right? Unless you're a brand new beginner. Okay. All right. So now we're going to find an exercise where you can't do more than 10 reps. Okay. To maximize strength. Now, you can improve strength doing a range of reps. You can do 30 reps and improve your strength. You can do 5 reps and improve your strength, right? As long as you work close to failure, right? So if you get to if you do like 30 push-ups, okay, or just say you can do 30 push-ups. If you do 27 push-ups and you start to slow down, you're like, oh, this is getting hard, okay, you're going to get stronger, okay? But if you work at around 5 to 10 reps, you'll get even more stronger than if you work at 30 reps, okay? So if you find an exercise where you can only do no more than 10 reps, okay, that will maximize your strength gains. And again, this is from that same systematic review, a different systematic review and meta-analysis by the same group from 2017 called Strength and Hypertrophy Adaptations Between Low versus High Load Resistance Training, Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis from the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research. And you can download that by clicking on that link in the PDF notes when I send them to you. All right. So at high loads, you maximize tension on the muscle fibers. We already talked about that, and therefore more strength gains. Okay. When you have low loads, like if you do the exercise where you can do 30 reps, okay, you do subject those fibers to tension. Okay. But when you have heavier loads, you just got more tension, right? So more tension equals more stimulus equals more strengthening, right? That's kind of pretty straightforward. So we said every Pilates exercise can be ranked in 3 dimensions: strength, range of motion, control. To progress strength, you need to train within 2 to 3 reps of failure, because then you're recruiting those final high threshold muscle fibers that have the greatest potential for increasing strength. And to also maximize strength, if you work at a load where you can't do more than 10 reps, so between 5 and 10, okay, that will maximize your strength gains. Although you can gain strength doing lighter loads, you'll gain more strength doing heavier loads. And when you can do more than 10 reps, that's when you progress. All right, so how do you know if someone can do more than 10 reps? Say you're teaching a group class of like mat work or something like that, and you're like, oh, how do I know who can do more than 10 reps of this exercise? Okay, well, I reckon you can tell within the first 5 reps who can't do more than 10 reps. Okay, so here is a real life situation. My wife, Julie, and I doing push-ups. We did this late last night. My daughter filmed us. Okay, now one of us can do 11 push-ups and one of us can do more than 11. See if you can spot within the first 5 reps which is which. You ready?
Yeah.
Can you see when she starts to slow down? Right, it's pretty easy, right? You can see even really from the first like 1 or 2 reps, I think you can probably just go, oh yeah, here's someone who's working, like when you saw Julie working there, that's the correct level of challenge, right? She was working at her 11 rep max, so she could do 11 push-ups. She couldn't do 12. She failed on the 12th, okay? So that was her correct level of challenge. She's in the maximum strength stimulus zone. She's going to get stronger from that workout, right? And you can see she moved slower and slower and slower. And she moved slower at the start as well because she was closer to failure. Rep number 1, she was closer to failure than I was, right? Even in rep number 1, when she's completely fresh, she's got 10 or 11 reps in the tank. I've got more than that, right? So I'm further away from failure. So I can move faster because as you get closer and closer to failure, you recruit more and more of those muscle fibers and the other ones are fatigued and you just haven't got the horsepower to go as fast anymore, okay? So you can see by the speed of movement and also how the speed changes, Okay, and you saw her form change and stuff as well. Okay, that tells you she's working in the right zone. She's approaching failure. Now, in your class, I don't recommend you push all the way to failure. It's actually better if you stop 2 or 3 reps short of failure. Okay, but you can see that, right? It's pretty easy. Thumbs up if you can see that, or if not, do you want to watch it again? Like, you can see that. Okay, great. I mean, that's what you do. You can see people moving and see how they're moving. All right, great. But the point is, you don't have to watch them go all the way to failure to know when they're going to fail. You can see it, in the distance. All right. So does that mean you need to work your whole class near to failure every exercise? No, it doesn't. Okay. So you just need 3 sets a week if you're a beginner. So this is someone in the first 6 months of working out, okay, consistently. Per body part, right? So like we said, like a flexion exercise, 3 sets of flexion exercises per week, 3 sets of extension exercises per week, right? 3 sets of upper body push, 3 sets of upper body pull per week, right? So if I'm doing 3 Pilates classes, that's like 1 set per class, right? And the rest of the class, mermaids and breathing and stretches and all of those other, Pilates things, right? So there might be like peaks and troughs in your session, and the peaks are where we go close to failure, and that's where we get our strengthening stimulus. And then the troughs are where we do breathing and balancing and stretching and all of that other stuff, right? We work on those other attributes. For intermediate clients, so people have been working out consistently 6 months or more, okay, like 6 to 12 months, they might need more, because as you get stronger, you need more stimulus to continue to get stronger. Otherwise, you can't just do 3 sets a week and then keep getting stronger forever and end up looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger on 3 sets a week. After a while, 3 sets won't be enough, right? But now, a lot of people, for 3 sets, they're going to get to a point where they're pretty strong and they're quite happy, and all they want to do is maintain. Great. They don't have to keep doing more, right? But if they want to keep doing more, if they want to get better, they might need to do more sets per week per movement, right? And for really advanced people who are like really strong, you need to do more, right? The stronger you are, the more you need to do to continue to get stronger. I mean, that kind of makes sense intuitively. But if you're progressing, you're doing enough sets, right? So if you're getting stronger, you don't need to keep doing more, right? If you plateau at some point, like 6 weeks later, you're still stuck doing the same exercise, you haven't been not able to do more reps, it's like, well, just do more sets per week and you'll start to get stronger again. All right, so we said that every Pilates exercise can be ranked in those 3 dimensions of strength, range of motion, and control. Now, we just talked about strength today, but you could do exactly the same thing for range of motion and for control, right? If you want to focus on a goal that is about flexibility or about, body control, you could just rank those exercises and go, okay, here's a number 1 out of 10 for control, here's a 2 out of 10, here's a 3 out of 10, and we'll start with the easy one and work towards the hard one, okay? To progress strength, you need to train within 2 to 3 reps of failure. That's where you start to visibly slow down, okay? And ideally, find an exercise where you can't do more than 10 reps, okay? 5 to 10. When you can do more than 10 reps, progress to the next exercise. And you probably won't be able to do more than 10 reps because that exercise is a bit harder. And just rinse and repeat that, and you keep getting stronger. All right, so all of this is wrapped up in what we call our exercise progression framework. So here it all is on one slide, basically. So we divide exercise into 6 categories, okay? Spinal flexion, spinal extension, rotation and side bending. And I just put rotation and side bending together because they basically use the same muscles, right? Your obliques and QLs and all that stuff, okay? Upper body push movements, upper body pull movements, and lower body push movement, squats, lunges, footwork, shoulder bridge, that kind of stuff. For each category, rank the exercises from easiest to hardest, okay? And you can rank them on those 3 dimensions of strength, range of motion, and control, okay? And using the spreadsheet that I'll send to you. Start with an exercise where, if you're teaching a group, right, start with an exercise, just look around the room, go, okay, I've got like a whole bunch of people over 80 in the room, or I'm working with Cirque du Soleil acrobats, or, a mixture. Okay. Just take your best guess at like, what's an exercise here that I'm pretty confident everyone in this room could do 20 reps, right? Start there, right? And then look at people moving, like you looked at Julie and me moving, and go, oh, I reckon this is about right for you, okay? But I reckon you could probably jump 3 levels along this progression and go to exercise number 4 here, okay? Based on how they're moving. Progress people until they can only do 10 reps, right? So we start with, just say we're doing flexion, right? We might start with like cat stretch. Okay, that's a flexion exercise. Okay, I'm pretty sure everyone in the room is going to be able to do 20 reps of cat stretch. So we do cat stretch. I look at some people moving. 1 or 2 people, I look at them and go, oh, I think this is your level of challenge. Maybe you're 85, severely obese, never done Pilates in your life. Okay, keep doing cat stretch. Okay, you, and you, and you. Let's move on to the ab prep, that first ab exercise we looked at with the fitness circle, okay? Oh, look at those people. This person's like struggling and shaking. Okay. So you stay doing this, okay? When you can't do any more, stop. You and you, who are moving real smooth, let's go into a teaser, okay? Progress them along. And eventually you get those people to a point where it's like, okay, no, I can't do more than 10 reps of this exercise. Does that make sense? And everyone just gets off the bus at the stop that's the right stop for them today. And this, when I say get off the bus, I mean can't do more than 10 reps of the exercise. Great question from Sabina. Clients often stop due to the burn. How does this relate to muscle failure? I will answer that, but I'm going to bump it to the end of the presentation if that's cool. And I'm happy to stick around after and answer as many questions as you want. I've got nowhere to go, nowhere to be. So I'm really happy to have that conversation, and I'm glad you asked it. All right, so that is the exercise progression framework. I'm going to send you all those tools. Now I'm going to indulge in 4 slides about the Diploma of Clinical Pilates, and then we'll do questions. So if you've enjoyed this presentation and found it useful, this is not a lecture from the diploma, but it is an example of what a lecture from the diploma is like. So this is not just like I haven't just lifted this from the diploma. Like I said, I made it brand new. The diploma is 42 weeks, 10 hours a week. So it's basically a full year. It's 5 to 7 hours live each week, right? So this is not like a self-paced online thing where you just work through videos or whatever. This is a very, very high-touch live program. There's a live lecture. There's a live tutorial. There are 2 live workshop reviews, and there are 2 live study groups every week. So it's very intensive live-wise. And it is a deep dive into anatomy, pathophysiology, biomechanics, pain science, motor learning, strength science. Like, we go through lots of stuff, and it's very in-depth. Like, I've had people go through this who've got master's degrees or doctors of physiotherapy or whatever, and they've learned lots in those realms. And you really know your stuff at the end. Like, this is not one of those courses where you get to the end and you go, oh yeah, that was good, but I still feel overwhelmed and don't know and feel like an imposter. You will walk out going, I freaking know my stuff. I'm really good. And I know it, because you will actually be good. It really is a life-changing, transformative experience. And I don't say that lightly. Brad Matheson said the Diploma of Clinical Pilates is the best decision I've made in furthering my education. Daphne said it's the best decision of my life. Debbie Gilbert says this has changed my life and improved my teaching more than anything I've ever learned. Rihanna Begg said I learned more in this course as far as real-world applications than I learned in my physio degree. Okay, so like this, and we've got like literally hundreds more of these. So I've got 2 special offers because, as you probably know, it's the last ever intake of the diploma. Okay, and special offer number 1 is if you enroll in diploma, if you have the funds, or you can beg, borrow, or steal, not steal, but beg or borrow the funds to pay in full. It's $5,000 US. Then you'll also get the Pilates Business Launchpad for free. And the Pilates Business Launchpad is a program where I will personally help you build a solo Pilates business, teaching online or at home, where you'll make $100,000 a year. So we'll teach you how to do what you need to do, and I will give you feedback on all of your things and walk you through all of the steps and the processes, and we will get you to that point. So if you enroll in Diploma and pay in full, you get the Launchpad for free. The Launchpad usually is $5,000 US. And so that's, again, it's a live plus online program. So you can do it from anywhere in the world. So that is that. And I'm hoping that you can click on this link in the PDF notes, but I'm hoping that Carol or someone else on my team will pop that link in the chat if you want to take advantage of that. And finally, special offer number 2, and this is my final slide about second to final slide about the diploma. Again, Louisa said, completely changed my approach to Pilates. Paige said, amazing transformational, educational, inspirational course. Like, we literally have hundreds of these, and I'll show you some more in a minute, but I won't read them out to you. So special offer number 2 is if you can't afford to pay in full, you can enroll for just $50 down and pay off the rest over 6 or 12 months interest free. So that is offer number 2. And again, it's the same link, and I'm hoping someone, Carol maybe, will pop that into the chat. If not, you can click on this when you get the PDF notes. Or if you're not ready to enroll just yet, you can actually just have a chat with us and ask us any questions and go through anything that's unclear for you or stressing you out about it. And finally, just Andrea here said, I've gone through a personal and professional transformation. Okay, and we literally have hundreds of these. That's our current Google rating, 5.0 out of 5 with 361 reviews. And to average 5 out of 5 with 361 reviews, like, basically they're all 5-star reviews. So this really, really does deliver, this program, I can say with my hand on my heart. All right, diploma pitch over. So if you have questions about any of the content in the lecture today or anything else, or the diploma, let's talk through those. There was the first question from Sabrina. And Sabrina says, clients often stop due to the burn. How does this relate to muscle failure, or is this purely to do with the production of lactate? What a great question. So the burn you feel in your muscles is an accumulation of partly lactic acid, but also free hydrogen ions. So basically, when your muscles work at a low to moderate level of intensity, they use an energy production system called anaerobic glycolysis, where glucose is converted to, split, and you liberate energy from the glycogen molecules without using oxygen. Right? And as a byproduct of this, you produce free hydrogen ions and lactate, which are both acids. And those acids literally burn the inside of your muscles, and you perceive that as a burning. So you've got chemical sensors on the inside of your muscles. They sense those free hydrogen ions and lactate, and you perceive that as burning. So burning tells you that you're working at a high level, of you're using anaerobic glycolysis, and you're accumulating free hydrogen ions in your muscle cells, which is not the same thing as subjecting individual muscle fibers to high levels of mechanical tension. Right? Now, sometimes when you subject individual muscle fibers to high levels of mechanical tension, you also work in anaerobic glycolysis and feel a burn, right? And sometimes you don't. And sometimes when you feel a burn, you're also subjecting your fibers to high levels of tension, and sometimes you're not, right? So just say I lifted a weight that was like 10% of my maximum, right? A really, really light weight, or you lifted that way, right? You can do like 100 reps, okay? Towards rep 60, you're going to be feeling the burn. Can you imagine it? Okay. But you're 40 reps from failure. You're nowhere near failure, right? So you have not yet subjected your muscles to a high level of mechanical tension, and you've not stimulated strengthening, but you did get the burn. right? Whereas if you lift a weight that is so heavy you can only do 5 reps, right? So just say you get the biggest dumbbell you can find, 5 reps, okay? You're not using anaerobic glycolysis for that, right? You're using your phosphocreatine energy system, a completely different energy system. It's like a hybrid car. You've got 2 motors in there, right? Using a different motor, okay? Doesn't produce free hydrogen ions and lactate. So you get to failure on your 5 rep weight, right? But no burn. Right? So it's possible to subject the muscles to high levels of tension with no burn. It's possible to have a burn with no high levels of tension, and it's also possible to do both, right? So if you find an exercise where you can only do, say, like 20 reps, whatever exercise that is, push-ups, squats, lunges, teasers, whatever it might be, okay? Just say you can do 20 reps. If you do 20 reps, right, you're like, oh, that last rep, okay? You're probably feeling a burn around about then. And you're also subjecting your muscle fibers to high levels of mechanical tension, right? So that's the long answer. Okay. The short answer is the burn doesn't tell you anything useful. It just tells you you've got free hydrogen ions in your muscle. It doesn't tell you whether you're stimulating strengthening. What tells you that stimulating strengthening is you start to slow down. Okay. That's when the little light goes on your dashboard. It's like, tick. Strength stimulus activated. Okay, so you have to get to that point where you start to slow down involuntarily, and that's when you've stimulated strength gains. Now, if you feel the burn as well, that's great. If you don't feel the burn as well, that's great. I know clients like the burn sometimes, so I'm not against giving them that experience that they see as evidence of being made stronger. But actually, the burn is like neither here nor there. You can get stronger without the burn. You can have the burn without getting stronger. So, yeah. Somi says, what if you only recently signed up but didn't receive any offers? Actually, you can get those offers. If you paid in full, we'll give you the launch pad for that. And if you're on a payment plan, you're not paying interest. So you already got it. Do you have to do the launch pad and the diploma at the same time, or can you do the launch pad at a later date? You can do them at the same time or at a different time. You get the launch pad lifetime access for the lifetime of the product. So you can start it now, you can start it later, you can dip in and out of it. It's a resource there for you to use. The diploma is in a cohort, so you start on a certain date. Everyone starts together. It's on the cutoff date to enroll is the 21st of August this year. This first lecture, I think, is on the 4th of September. Don't quote me on that, but that's about the start date of it within a couple of days. And so everyone starts together. So we all do like week 1 together and we all do week 2 together. It's a 42-week journey, okay, very curated. Whereas in the launch pad, it's just start at your own time. You can start whenever it suits you, and you could be on week 1 and someone else can be on week 75 or whatever. It's like, it's completely self-paced. So the launch pad, you can dip in and out. Sarah says, when does enrollment end? 21st of August is our enrollment cutoff date. The classes start, I'm pretty sure it's the 4th of September. We need that buffer in there from the 21st of August because we need to get you onboarded. We need to get you set up with your, all of the things log you into the system. There's some pre-work you need to do. You need to get put into a study group. Like there's a bit of organisational stuff that has to happen at the start of the program so that on day 1 of lectures, you actually are ready to learn like content and we're not mucking around doing housekeeping and getting you organised and all of that stuff. So the getting organised part happens from the 21st of August to the 4th of September. And then the 4th of September is when we start filling your brain with new ideas and teaching you, more stuff. So 21st of August is the cutoff. Why don't we work up to complete failure? Wouldn't the last 20% of fibers benefit from complete failure? From Francisca. Great question. Now, this is I would say it is not a raging debate, but I'd say there's still some question marks in the scientific literature about how close to failure should you go. And there are people who advocate going all the way to failure, and there are people who advocate stopping 2 to 3 reps short of failure. And I'd say broadly speaking, the literature is pretty, I would say it's like 80% settled at this point, that for maximum strength, you should stop 2 to 3 reps short of failure. Whereas for maximum hypertrophy, like muscle growth, okay, go all the way to failure. Right? Now, strength and muscle growth go together. Like, it's hard to be really strong and have tiny muscles, right? So, strength and muscle growth to a certain extent are related. So when you stop 2 to 3 reps short of failure, you will get stronger and bigger muscles, okay? But you'll get even bigger muscles if you go all the way to failure. But not a lot, just a little bit. And it's thought that, we don't know exactly why, but in terms of strength, the last 5 to 7 reps are the most stimulating reps, right? It might be 8, might be 6, but basically the last 5 to 7 reps-ish are the ones where the magic happens. That's when you've got full recruitment of all your muscle fibers with high levels of tension. And once you do like 4 or 5 reps at that load, right, you've created a stimulus, right? And if you do more reps in that same set, right, you get to that point where you are causing more damage, and you get a little bit more of a stimulus, but you also create more damage in those last couple of reps. And so when you elevate muscle protein synthesis after a workout, so muscle protein synthesis just means building more proteins in the muscle. Muscle is made of proteins. Proteins in the muscle are the bits that contract. They're the bits that do the work, right? So when you get stronger, one of the main things that happens is you put more proteins in those muscles, right? More proteins equals more strength of contraction. But muscles are made of protein. When we damage those muscles, we have to repair them. To repair them, they're made of protein, so we have to synthesize protein, right? So when you go all the way to failure, you're synthesizing all this protein, but a large part of that is going to just repairing the damage that you did in those last 2 reps, right? So there's less protein available to increase the packing density of those contractile proteins. So it's like the damage you did consumes more resources and diverts those resources away from increasing strength, right? So that's the theory. That's not settled. That's like just people are kind of speculating on the mechanism, but we've got sort of indirect evidence for that. So stopping 2 to 3 reps short of failure, there's a trade-off between more stimulus but also more damage, right? And so that ideal balance point between stimulus and damage seems to be about 2 to 3 reps short of failure. Whereas if you're purely interested in growing your muscles bigger, now, I know that's like a terrible thing to say to most female clients. I don't want big muscles. It's like, okay, use the word toning if you must, okay? Toning's not a thing. It's not open up the physiology textbook, you won't see the word toning, okay? It's just a layperson's term. It's a euphemism, okay? Like when we say someone passed away instead of they died, okay? We say toning instead of growing your muscles, right? It's just a term that's more acceptable for people, but it means the same thing, okay? So anyway, if your main goal is not strength, okay, if your main goal, you'll get stronger either way and you'll get bigger muscles either way, or toned either way, okay? But if your main goal is strength, stop 2 to 3 reps short of failure. If your main goal is hypertrophy or growing your muscles or getting toned, whichever you want to call it, okay, push all the way to failure, right? The other thing, though, about pushing all the way to failure is it freaking hurts, right? It's uncomfortable. It takes a lot of psychological effort, and it's less fun. So some people are motivated by that, and that's great. And some people are demotivated by it, and it becomes like, oh, crap, do I have to go to Pilates because they're going to push me all the way till I literally can't do another push-up again, okay? And that can be aversive, and you'll find that they will stop showing up. So as a general rule, I would not take people to failure, just from a motivational, psychological standpoint. I don't work to failure very often myself. I mostly don't. You can get like more strength with less effort. It's like, well, why wouldn't you do that? To me, that's just a no-brainer. So that's a great question. Suzanne says, can I ask an unrelated question? Listen to one of your podcasts recently Suzanne, I will answer that, but can I just bump that to the end because I want to answer the questions about the workshop first. And if you don't mind sticking around, I'll answer that when we run out of those other questions. Jara says, is there a good reason why you would often do more reps? So do you mean like, Jara, like doing an exercise where you can do like 30, 40, 50 reps, that sort of thing? Is that what you mean? Yep. So if your goal was, say, control, more coordination, more body weight, like we're doing higher reps, lower load is probably a better plan. But in terms of strengthening, not a good plan. So you just get less, like the more reps you do, anywhere between 5 and 30 reps to failure, you'll grow the muscle basically the same amount, right? So if you do 5 reps to failure, you do 30 reps to failure, you will get essentially identical results in terms of muscle growth. You'll get more strength at heavier loads, right? So within that 5 to 30 rep spectrum, 5 reps will give you more strength than 30 reps, even if you go 2 to 3 reps short of failure at both loads, right? So all other things being equal, heavier loads will give you more strength. But anywhere from 5 to 30 reps is like for the average person, right, who just wants to go from being sedentary to being like somewhat fit, right? Anywhere from 5 to 30 reps, they won't be able to tell the difference. It's all good, right? But for someone who's really strong already and wants to get even stronger, well, you got to use heavy loads to maximize that strength improvement, right? But anywhere from 5 to 30 is totally fine. Beyond 30 reps, okay, even if you go to failure, you're basically doing low intensity cardio, right? And you're not going to stimulate muscle growth. If you think about going for a run, okay, you might do 10,000 reps of a quarter squat, right? With, one-legged squat, okay? So your quads and your calves and whatever are contracting thousands of reps. But if you run 10 kilometers every day, your legs don't get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, right? And it's just at that threshold, beyond 30 reps, you're basically stimulating your body in a different way towards adapting to do high rep, low load exercise, which actually, to be a better distance runner, you want smaller legs, a smaller torso. You want to be light and lean, So the adaptations to get stronger and the adaptations to get better at running a marathon are kind of like opposite in some regards, right? And so the threshold between like, okay, what's strength versus what's endurance seems to be about 30 reps, right? And when I say endurance, I mean like basically cardio, right? You're not going to build muscle doing 40, 50, 60 reps. Now, like I said at the beginning, if you're a beginner, right, anything will build muscle, right? So go for, like there are studies showing beginners, completely sedentary people, they just put them on a running program, their leg muscles get bigger, right? But that's because their leg muscles started out from very, very small, right? So if you get someone who's a very strong, like a power lifter, okay, and you stop them powerlifting and you send them running marathons, they're going to get smaller, right? So, and that's that 30 reps seems to be the demarcation point. That's about 40% of your 1RM, I think, 30 reps, okay? So your 1 rep max is the maximum you can lift one time, okay? About 40% of that weight is, you can do lift about 30 reps. Below that, you seem to basically not get any noticeable strength gains unless you're a complete beginner. So Yan Ping said, how would you strengthen the transversus abdominis? With the above concepts, well, the transversus abdominis key role is, well, it's got 2 key roles. One is it contributes to stabilizing the torso. When I mean stabilizing the torso, I mean like stop it bending, one way or the other, making it stiff. And the other is it works in forced exhalation. So when you sneeze or cough or blow out. So you could do either or both of those things against load, right? So there's respiratory muscle training where you get like a thing that you blow into and it resists, it's got a little thin aperture on it, so you can't blow, you have really hard work to blow into it. So you have to, really force the air out. And that trains your respiratory muscles, of which transverse abdominis is a key one. So you could do that type of thing. The other thing is just things that very significantly challenge spinal stability. So things like planks and whatever. Now, we don't have good EMG data, like electromyograph, like measuring muscle activation data on transverse abdominis. We know, quite well which exercises maximally activate the obliques, the rectus abdominis, the quadratus lumborum, the whatever. But no one's really done those studies on transversus abdominis. I guess it's hard to get electrodes in there because it's the deepest layer. And if you put an electrode on the surface, it just basically picks up the surface muscles. And so it's hard to know, like, how much is the transversus activated under there in those exercises. So, but just from the basic principles of biomechanics and understanding, the role of the muscle, it should be working hard in things like planks and, anything where you're basically bracing your torso in a kind of neutral position, like heavy squats, right? You're bracing your torso in neutral, push-ups, leg pull front, leg pull back, leg pull, those types of things. I'd be pretty confident you work your transversus pretty hard in those. Or respiratory muscle training. Everardo said, do you get Launchpad with the payment plan? Unfortunately, you do not. My sorry. We do want to encourage you to pay in full. That's why. Matt says Launchpad's amazing. Thanks, Matt. Jamie says, is the diploma a recognised qualification in the UK? Yes, it is. We've got multiple people who've done the diploma in the UK and are now teaching, probably a dozen or more at this point. So yes, definitely. Cindy says, how does the comprehensive differ from the diploma course? The comprehensive is a certification which teaches you how to teach Pilates. So it's like, here's the mat, here's the reformer, here's the Cadillac, here's the barrel, all of that stuff. Here's how you construct a session. Here's how you cue. Here's how you, modify for someone who's pregnant. Here's how you, all of those things, right? So it's a certification like the certifications probably most of you have done, although I would say it's better, but, I'm biased. Whereas the diploma, you don't learn any repertoire. We will not teach you one exercise on the mat, the reformer, the barrels, the chair, the Cadillac, nothing. We assume that you already know some exercises, either on the mat or the reformer or some combination, okay? And we will teach you a clinical framework of how to think, okay, how to understand what's going on inside the body and make pictures in your mind of the parts and how they're moving and which muscles are contracting and what the tension on the ligaments is and whatever, and to understand the pathology and the pain science and all of that stuff so that you can use the exercises you already know to help clients overcome pain and injury, right? And as an example, what we talked about today, okay, I didn't teach you any new exercises. Okay, I assumed you already know most of those exercises we've talked about, right? I'm helping you think about those exercises in a different way and use them as a tool to progress somebody's strength in this case, right? So we'll do the same thing as like, okay, what if that person has knee osteoarthritis, or what if they have, a hip replacement, or what if they have shoulder impingement or whatever? It's like, how would we change the way we think about this given this person's goal, situation, diagnosis, etc. So the diploma really is not like a regular Pilates certification. We're not going to teach you any Pilates. We're going to assume you already know Pilates, and we're going to teach you a clinical framework to use what you know to help people overcome pain and injury. Peggy Kaiser, what a great question, Peggy. Do the muscle fibers react the same way as strength training when focusing on range of motion with a client? The answer is kind of yes and kind of no. So when you stretch, when you do like a passive stretch, like just a seated forward fold or something like that, mostly what happens, that results in you getting more flexible. Okay, like when you get stronger, one of the main thing that causes you to get stronger is you get more proteins inside your muscle. Like the muscle physically gets bigger, right? And that's what causes you to be stronger. Now, there are other components to that. We can talk about those some other time. But the main thing is you actually just get more stuff inside your muscle, more contractile proteins, more machinery inside those muscles. Whereas when you get more flexible by doing like a passive stretch, mostly what happens is the muscles don't change. What happens is you just develop a tolerance in your central nervous system, your spinal cord and brain, to that discomfort of stretching. And you just actually like recalibrate so it becomes less uncomfortable so you can just go further. Because the thing that stops us going further when we stretch is pain, right? It's uncomfortable to stretch any further. So just that pain tolerance decreases or increases, sorry, when we stretch passively. However, when you do loaded work through at end range, right? So instead of a passive forward fold, if we did something like got a hand weight, okay, and did a standing forward bend with a hand weight so that the back of the legs and the back of the body is working against that hand weight, and then we're stretch, basically a loaded stretch, right? But instead of just holding the end position, it's just you're doing, or an even better example would be Pilates example, front splits on the reformer. Okay, where your front foot's on the foot bar, your back foot's on the, Joseph said on the headrest, but let's face it, everyone does it on the shoulder pad, right? So your back foot's on the shoulder pad, your legs are straight, and you split, right? Now, if you put a lightish spring on that, okay, so you are working the hamstrings of the front leg to control the carriage and stretching them, okay? So if you're working at end range, you are stretching. And what will happen is those muscle fibers will adapt by, and let me see if I can draw this out for you. So when you have a muscle fiber, there's your muscle fiber, okay, goes from one end of the muscle to the other. Well, that muscle fiber is made up of all these things called sarcomeres, that are end to end. And then you've got another muscle fiber and another muscle fiber and another muscle fiber, okay? And each of those has sarcomeres in it as well, okay? And the sarcomere is just, it's like the building block, it's like the brick that makes the house, okay, of the muscle, okay? So the sarcomere is like the smallest unit of a muscle that actually contracts. And so when you do strength training through mid-range, okay, so if you do, just like, maybe if you do hamstring curls, right? You're working basically in mid-range and short range there, okay? What happens is the muscle gets stronger by putting on extra sarcomeres in parallel. So next to the other sarcomeres, you get more sarcomeres, right? More sarcomeres equals more powerful contraction equals a stronger muscle. It also equals a wider muscle. Is this making sense? However, when you load, okay, when you do strength training at end range, what happens instead is you tend to put on more sarcomeres in series. So you put on sarcomeres end to end, okay? So the muscle literally gets longer. Now, you also improve your stretch tolerance, like we talked about, it just becomes less uncomfortable, right? So as part of it's neural, okay? But part of the adaptation that happens when you do strength training at end range is you actually get more sarcomeres in series. So the muscle has more sarcomeres, so therefore more contractile units, therefore more strength, okay? But it's not wider, it's longer, okay? So it literally does make your muscles longer and leaner, okay, when you do strength training at end range as opposed to mid-range. So, yeah, so strength training at end range really is the same thing as stretching, right? So a front splits exercise on the reformer, if you go to full range, right, you're going to get stronger and more flexible. So that would be like a 8 out of 10 for strength and an 8 out of 10 for range of motion, right? Because you're challenging both of those things. Now, to a certain extent, they are exclusive. Like, as you go further and further on a front split, okay, it's harder and harder if you're on, like, let me rephrase this. Just say you're doing a front split on the reformer on 2 springs, right, which is a pretty heavy setting, okay, you can probably go further, okay, than on a half spring. I know I can, okay. The half spring's really light, and as you get to that end range, the muscle gets weaker and weaker and weaker due to the length-tension relationship, right? So you actually can't tolerate as much load at end range as you can in the mid-range. So you're stronger in the mid-range. So yes, front split is going to improve your strength and your flexibility. But if you really wanted to improve your strength, you should do more like mid-range, because you'll be able to use more load in the mid-range, right? But if you want to just pretty significantly improve your strength and your flexibility, do end range, but you have to use a bit of an easier load compared to working in the mid-range. Sarah says, or you could just do passive stretching, right? So if you just do that works too. But the mechanism's is not the same. So passive stretching, unless you do like the 9 out of 10 discomfort in the boot an hour a day, okay? I'm talking about like a forward fold a couple of minutes a day sort of thing. You're mainly going to get neural adaptations to the stretch. So you're not really going to do much to change your muscles by just doing passive stretching. Although passive stretching is awesome and does increase flexibility very significantly, and I'm all for it. I do it every day. But it has a different mechanism than strength training at end range. But strength training at end range is as effective as passive stretching at improving flexibility, right? So they both work equally well. Sarah says, do you know in advance when the live sessions will be scheduled? Slightly concerned about not being able to make all the live sessions between teaching and mumming. Yes, you do know in advance. The lecture is at a set time each week. The tutorials are at set times. Your study groups are at set times. The review sessions are at set times. For all of those sessions, there are 2 options. One is for the lecture and the reviews. They're only they occur once during the week. So the lecture is Monday morning, 5 a.m. my time, whatever time that is for you. It's the same time we started today, right? But it's just on my Monday. So if you're in the US or UK, whatever, it'll be your Sunday. But that's live and recorded. So you don't have to attend it live. You can, or if not, you can watch the recording. The review sessions are the same. They're live and recorded. So you don't have to be there, but you can. And then the tutorials you must attend, but they're like 8 during the week. So you can choose mornings, evenings, weekdays, weekends, whatever. You can choose what suits you. And the same for the study groups. You just choose one. There's bazillions, so you just choose the ones that suit you. So we've got people that are mums, full-time employed, there are people who've done this course very successfully, running Pilates studios at the same time, etc. So the scheduling, I'm not going to lie, it's 10 hours a week, it's 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. That's work, right? You're going to have to make time for it. But in terms of the flexibility of when that time is, it's very, very flexible. Does the diploma get recognised with the medical aid? I don't know what you mean by that. So if you're still here, Lynn, you can give me more detail on what you mean by that, please. Jamie says, if you're doing leg work on the reformer, do we want to have people as heavy as possible? Or if this is the warm-up, are they benefiting from this? Trying to decide if we're taking people to failure for every exercise. I wouldn't take people to failure on every exercise. It gets pretty miserable, and it's not necessary. Warm-ups are okay, and a warm-up should just be basically the thing you're warming up for, a bit lighter, right? So if you're going to be doing push-ups, just do like kneeling push-ups as the warm-up sort of thing. Or if you're going to be doing, now if you want to, progress people on footwork, pretty soon you're going to run out of springs, right? So then you have to go to single leg footwork, okay? And pretty soon you're going to run out of springs there too. So you might have to go to single leg jumping or something. So you're going to have to progress people in terms of spring tension there. So if you're starting off with the footwork, I would put, as many springs on as the person can manage. I think for most people, of average strength, they can do all springs and easily do 20 reps. If you've got somebody who's very old or very deconditioned or whatever, it's like that might be different for them. But I think what stops people from doing all springs in footwork is like it's surprising, it's uncomfortable. They feel the pads pressing into their shoulders. It's like, this is weird. Am I doing it wrong? This is really hard work. Yeah, that's normal. Like that's what getting stronger feels like. This is the process. So but you don't have to do it to failure every time, and I don't recommend it. Louisa says, when we talk about failure, are we looking at range of motion to a full rep needs to be full ROM? You will get stronger, like I said before, from doing partial range of motion, like mid-range reps, but it's actually not full range, it's end range where most of the gains happen. So if you do strength training through full range, okay, versus through partial range but at short range, versus partial range but at end range, okay, this one works best. This one works least. This one works second best, right? So strength training through range, yes, but even better, strength training at range is even better. So partial reps at close to end range is where you'll get the biggest gains, okay? But so, if you're doing like a front split, okay, you don't have to come back in all the way. Like basically the last half where you're coming back in is completely a waste, right? It's just the out and then the back into halfway and out and back into halfway. That's where 90% of the benefit accrues in that exercise. So yeah, I would emphasize working at long muscle lengths for sure. And that will build both flexibility and strength. Yan Ping said, but it is hard to monitor the failure. Yeah, it is. And so what I recommend is you train your clients to start to recognize that point themselves, okay, by pointing out to them, okay, Mary, do you see as you're doing this, 8th push-up that you're slowing down quite a bit? Okay, that's when you stop, right? When you first start to notice like, I'm getting really slow here, that's when you stop. Or do you see, Mary, as you're doing that 8th push-up that you're kind of like twisting and your torso's bending and your hips are moving? When you notice yourself doing that, that's when you stop. Okay, so you train them up to do that. And then, and I've done this in a group class situation very successfully, you basically can just say to them, hey, look, we're going to do a progression for push-ups or flexion or spinal extension or front splits or whatever it is. Now, I want you to get off the bus at whatever stop suits you. And it's your stop when you get to that point where you start to slow down, okay? That means it's your stop and you don't keep going into the harder exercises after that. So that, and then you just give them feedback. Hey, Mary, I think you could have done a couple more reps that time. Or Mary, I think you probably did too many reps that time. Did you notice how you actually couldn't lift yourself on that last rep? Well, that means you probably pushed, like you should have stopped like 2 reps before that. Question. I can't see any more questions. If I've missed a question and you're still here, please just unmute and verbalise it. There was an unrelated question. I can't remember it.
Hello, I have a question.
Hey, Sophia.
Yes, so if you've got a really strong client who has an injury, how do you then gauge working around that injury and maybe regressing that particular body part, but still keeping the rest of the body at the same level that they were at before?
Well, that's exactly what I would do. And so what you need there is just enough understanding of anatomy and biomechanics that you can load adjacent body parts without overloading the injured part, right? So you need to know, okay, which movements, which ranges of motion are safe for this person and which do I need to regress? And so that comes with understanding the anatomy deeply, right? So if they've got, like, are you thinking about a particular client, a particular injury?
Yes, I have a client who has a broken rib.
Okay, well, a broken rib is going to limit a lot of movements, because anything that's really a whole body movement, from a squat to a plank to a push-up, is going to involve co-contracting all the torso muscles to make the torso rigid. So basically anything like that is going to aggravate the injury. And obviously
she's 4 weeks in and kind of just going with sort of her feedback. So if she says, that doesn't feel great, then we kind of skip it and do something else.
Yeah. So the rules I would give you for that, because knowing that basically all of the abs attach to the ribs, okay, the breathing muscles, the intercostals, and the diaphragm attached to the ribs. So basically, anytime you move your back or your abs or you breathe, you're loading the ribs, okay? So anything where you're forcefully breathing, anything where you're side bending, twisting, forward bending, backward bending, anything where you're loading the torso in neutral, like a squat or a plank or a push-up or a side plank or something like that, they're all going to potentially load the rib. Now, a side plank against the wall is very, very low load compared to a side plank on a reformer on a light spring is a very high load, right? So there's load, there's the degree of load as well as just how, where the force is. But so, I would work arms and legs in isolation, right? So if you could do something like rest her elbow on a box or a support and do bicep curls, right? The torso is going to do almost nothing there, right? So you could load that very heavy, right? Or do something like a leg movement that doesn't involve stabilizing the torso. So if you could get her doing, say, a hamstring curl, right, against a band or against a, right, where she's seated or laying or whatever on a cushion. So, if you can get her comfortable in that, or side lying or whatever, so that her torso is not like stabilizing against the load. So if you can isolate legs, calf raises, knee extensions, hamstring curls, clams, side leg lifts, as long as the torso is supported, right, you'll probably find those are fine. You can load them up. Same with arms, like you can do like side raises, where each arm kind of counterbalances the other side, okay? So you're not doing a lot of torso stabilization. Or if you can isolate biceps and triceps and, things like that, those should be easy for you to load. Whereas anything that's whole body, planks, push-ups, mermaids, things like that, you're going to have to be much gentler. And I know you've already figured this out. So the second rule, that's the first rule, is you can isolate the limbs and go hard, but you have to regress the torso. The second rule is the 24-hour rule. So when recovering from an injury, typically bones take like 6 to 8 weeks to heal. Ribs are sometimes a bit longer because you can't cast them or splint them. But 6 to 8 weeks is a good rough guide, okay, for a bone to heal. And over that time, it will be painful when you load it, but loading is good for healing. It stimulates collagen deposition and alignment. So we shouldn't avoid loading it, and we shouldn't avoid pain, but we should avoid pain that doesn't settle within a day after a workout, right? So if she's working out and she goes, oh, this feels uncomfortable, it's like, yeah, that's fine. If you can tolerate it, let's keep going, okay? But if she comes back 2 days later and says, my rib's still sore from the workout 2 days ago, it's like, we overdid it, right?
You did a podcast on that a little while ago, maybe. Or I listened to it a little while ago. So, on that 24-hour rule thing.
24-hour rule. So tolerable pain during the session's okay. If it doesn't settle, if it settles within 24 hours, it's all good. If it doesn't settle within 24 hours, don't stress. Just do a bit less next time and let it settle. Okay. But the thing is, it's a moving target. So as she gets stronger, you'll be able to do more without aggravating it, right? And you need to do more, because otherwise she won't be stimulated to heal properly and get stronger.
Yeah. Thank you.
No worries. Are there any other questions? I'm sorry, there's just like a bazillion messages in the chat here. Thank you, Carol, for putting this one in here from Tina. If you haven't learned how to teach the repertoire, will you struggle to keep up in the diploma? Does the diploma include access to some of the resources of the certification program? Tina, I would say if you know the repertoire, if you've done a lot of Pilates, like personally, yes, you have all the resources in the diploma of all of the mat work, all of the reformer repertoire. We've got instructional videos in there, but there isn't any like live lesson in the diploma where we're going to give you feedback on your exercise technique or, any of that stuff. We do talk a lot about cueing because there's a whole component on motor learning in the diploma. So that is something that we work on. But we don't go through, like if you've never taught movement, I would say it's probably not the right program for you. But if you're like a fitness trainer or a yoga instructor or physiotherapist or something, and you've never taught Pilates, but you've done Pilates, I think you'll be fine. I think you'll be fine in the diploma. From Sabrina, what about DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness? So they were fine and not working to failure in the class, but 2 days later they complain they're in pain. Some like this, but if the DOMS linger for too long, we know they've worked too hard and possibly the worry is to cause damage. It's then harder to isolate which exercise caused it. So great question, Sabrina. So DOMS, like soreness during a workout, soreness after a workout is not a good indicator of how effective the workout was. So you can have a very effective workout with 0 DOMS, and you can have a very ineffective workout with lots of DOMS. Or you can have a very effective workout with lots of DOMS, right? It's just they sometimes go together, they sometimes don't. So whether or not you have DOMS is just not, it doesn't really tell you anything useful about whether you had a good workout or not. DOMS is delayed onset muscle soreness. It's a soreness which starts 24 to 48 hours after a workout. So if you're sore, like when you finish a workout, you're already sore, that's not DOMS. Right? So DOMS is where you walk away, you go, oh, that was a great workout, I feel fine, I feel great, I feel good. And then the next day you wake up and you go to get out of bed and you're like, oh, my abs. Or you go to sit on the toilet and you're like, oh, my glutes. So, that's the DOMS is kind of sneaks up on you. And it's a completely normal, completely benign and safe phenomenon that occurs with unaccustomed, particularly eccentric, so the lengthening phase of the exercise, unaccustomed eccentric exercise, right? So it's not to do with how fit you are, it's to do with how accustomed you are to the specific movement that you did, right? So you could be an elite, triathlete running marathons twice a week, right? And then you go and do a stretch class and do front splits and you've got DOMS for 4 days, right? It's not to do with how fit you are. It's to do with the fact that it's an unaccustomed movement, position, range of motion. And so if you do Pilates regularly and then you take 2 weeks off, first class back, you hit it hard, you're going to get DOMS, right? Because you became unaccustomed to it, right? So even though you virtually lost no fitness in the 2 weeks, there's something which is very poorly understood. It's called the repeated bout effect. And all it means is the first session back, you get lots of DOMS. The second session and subsequent sessions, you get much less DOMS. So basically, the more you do something, the more often you do something, the less DOMS you're going to get. So if you want to give people DOMS, you have to do unaccustomed exercises, right? So if I come to your class and, one day we do, certain exercises, and the next time I come back 2 days later, we do a completely different set of exercises, I'm probably going to get DOMS both times, right? So if every time I come back, we do different exercises, one day we do side splits, next day we do front splits, next day we do legs in straps, next day we do whatever, okay, I'm probably going to get perpetual DOMS. But if we do front splits every day, right, first day I'll get DOMS, after that, not a thing. So by giving people, mostly the same workout and maybe just tweak a few little differences in the workout to keep it interesting. Okay, but basically you always do front splits, you always do planks, you always do hundreds, you always whatever the exercise you always do. You'll minimize the DOMS because they'll have what's called that repeated bout effect. They'll become desensitized to it. If on the other hand they see DOMS as a valid measure of like, oh, that was a great workout because I was sore for a week afterwards. Well, great. Switch it up every day and they'll always have DOMS and then they'll be happy. Katie says, how does everyone manage cramp during class? Cramp is another thing that is very poorly understood as to what causes it. So I did some reading on this a little while ago because I was getting cramps myself. And so I looked into all of those things that I'd heard, like it's, magnesium deficiency, it's dehydration, it's electrolyte imbalance, it's, whatever. And none of those things, right? So they've done studies where they get people who get cramps and they give them magnesium supplements and they get these other people a placebo and they find no difference. Everyone gets the same amount of cramps. And of course, if you're like extremely dehydrated or electrolyte depleted at the end of a marathon, yes, that can be a cause of cramps. But if you're just like a regular person who has a reasonably okay diet but not amazing, magnesium, etc., is not going to be the solution to cramping. So we don't really know what causes cramping or what can prevent it, but we do know it almost always occurs when you contract a muscle maximally at very short range. Okay, so when you contract a muscle maximally at in its inner range. Okay, so if you think about typically when people get cramps on your reformer class, it's like shoulder bridge on a light spring is the absolute classic, right? Or in a mat class, if you're doing shoulder bridge with your feet on a roller or something, okay, that is a total classic hamstring cramp scenario. And if you think about it, the hip is in extension in shoulder bridge, okay, or neutral, very close to extension. We've only got about 10 or 15 degrees of extension. The knee is flexed, so the hamstring is very, very short in that position. And then putting a light spring on asks it to contract very strongly, okay? So we're putting it in a shortened position and asking it to contract strongly, and that's a recipe for cramping. So you can either just go, okay, well, hey, everyone, we're going to do shoulder bridge, suck it up, okay? Or you can think, okay, what's an exercise where we could work the hamstrings at a longer length, right? So something like a front split where you're working the hamstring strongly but at a long length. People never get hamstring cramps in that exercise, right? So you can just work them at a longer muscle length. When you do get a cramp, if you just stretch it out, as you all know, that alleviates the symptom because the stretching is the opposite of the short range contracting. So I'm sorry I don't have any great wisdom there. You probably already knew stretching out your calf when you get a cramp is the thing to do, but that's the thing to do. Sabrina says, really interested in the diploma. Thank you for addressing all of my questions. Happy to email these through, but if helpful for other UK-based people, would this clinical diploma allow me to upgrade my insurance to allow me to help rehab clients in the UK? That I don't know, but I have several graduates who are working with rehab clients in the UK, so I'm not sure of the specifics of the insurance scenario there, but I could put you in touch with some of those people if you want on social media. You can ask them. Would the clinical Pilates diploma be sufficient to allow me to be registered with the GP referral program paid for by the NHS? That I don't know. I'm sorry. But I do have a view on, I mean, I understand what the NHS is, the National Health Scheme, I think, where basically the government pays for the session, right? You get some kind of, the patient or the client comes to see you and then you get paid by the NHS instead of the client paying you directly. Have I understood that correctly? So we have something similar in Australia too, private health insurance, we have Medicare, we have NDIS, we have lots of different things that are kind of like government, or basically the client doesn't pay, someone else pays. And my view on those, because I'm an exercise physiologist, I've got a Medicare number here in Australia. I can do all of those things. I can get government, to pay for clients or whatever. Now, I don't have direct knowledge of the UK, but I'd be shocked if it was different, just from the nature of governments, is that the government pays you a pittance, right? So whatever you would normally charge, they'll probably pay you a quarter of that, and they'll pay you like 5 months after the session, after you submit 99 forms. And there's probably like half an hour of paperwork for every hour of seeing a client. And so I just reckon it's not worth it. Plus, the clients who come on a like disability scheme or, whatever, they're usually the least motivated. Often they have very poor health literacy. They have very little interest in exercise. Like the archetypal NDIS client in Australia is like a Greek migrant, like council worker who doesn't speak a word of English and is, 75 years old, smokes like a factory and, just wants a piece of paper so that they don't have to go to work for the next 2 weeks, right? So now, nothing against Greeks. But I've got lots of friends who work in this space in exercise physiology, and they struggle with these issues. So I reckon you're better off to just charge the client directly, charge high prices, and provide amazing value, and people will seek you out, and you'll have a happier life, and you'll be able to help people more. Like when people come along and they're not motivated, and they're just there because they need a piece of paper from their doctor or whatever, it's like you're not going to get great results with those people. I mean, plus I don't know the specifics in the UK, but in Australia, under the insurance scheme here, you get 5 sessions with an exercise physiologist, and the first session's got to be an assessment, and the last session's got to be an assessment because you've got to do like a pre and post, like what results did I get this person? And they send you someone who's like morbidly obese and had diabetes for 25 years and hasn't exercised in 20 years, right? And you've got 5 half-hour sessions, and the 2 of them have got to be assessments, so you've got 3 sessions. Right? What do you get? This person needs to lose 30 kilos, walk every day, change their diet. Like, what are you going to do in 3 sessions? And the person's not going to do any more than 3 sessions because they're not going to pay you because the government's paying for it. So it's very depressing working with those people. I don't recommend it. Yeah, I'm sorry if there's other questions and I've missed them. Feel free to just verbalise. Okay, looks like we're done. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for your great questions. Really great to hang out with you. And if you're watching this after the fact and you've got questions, ping me on social media. Find me on Instagram. That's where I mostly hang out. And if you want to talk to one of our team about the diploma or the launchpad, there will be a link under this video recording of that you will be able to click on. And if you're watching this live, we'll send you the link in an email. All right. Have a great day or evening, wherever you are, and see you soon.